everybody. I'm Marcia Boyles, your host this morning, and I'm delighted as always to introduce our Executive Director, Ben Cornthwaite. Excuse me, Ben, I'm not getting that correct. We have a call-in show today.
Indeed we do.
So, until we get calls, what would you like to be addressing this morning?
Well, it's always good to be here, and I particularly like having the opportunity to have these call-in shows to let's dispel any rumors, ideas, or beliefs, or simply just to offer feedback or be able to answer any questions that are on the minds of residents. So upcoming, we've got later this week, starting tomorrow, we've got our feedback forums that are launching, and these are great opportunities for residents to be able to engage in kind of an open brainstorming session, if you will, with the management team and with residents from our resident council to include the various subcommittees that work for or work directly with the resident council. So these sessions are really not intended to be questions and answer sessions of, how does this work, and expect a response. This is more about digesting the feedback of, hey, I would like to see this happen differently, or I'd like to see you focus in on this particular issue within the community, knowing that each and every one of those feedback opportunities comes with action from the management team and the working resident committee. So just a great opportunity to prioritize our energies and really look to establish what it is that we're going to be focusing on in 2016.
Ben, if I remember correctly from last year, the format of this, as you're saying, is not to respond to comments and questions, but rather simply to keep a list of them,
right,
so that those can be addressed later. Now, do I also recall that you pretty much focused on the things that were brought up in the surveys?
That's correct. That's kind of the primary impetus for this is resident satisfaction. Mm-hmm. Now, a little bit different this year is that in the prior year, what we did was to take the bottom 3 factors in each area of domain. So for example, in dining services, we would take the bottom 3 scoring factors, and those were going to be our targeted discussion points mm-hmm. for these feedback forums. The feedback that residents gave was, well, that was a little too limiting.
Yes, it
was. And so this year we're going to keep it wide open, and the idea is we're not going to just talk about 3 areas within dining services. We're going to talk about all things dining services, okay, or all things general services, for example. So, really any subject area within that domain is fair game, and so we invite any and all ideas associated with that.
All right, I think that makes a lot of sense. The other thing, of course, is that between September, when we filled those surveys out, and February, there certainly have been new issues
sure.
That have arisen.
Sure.
Things have changed.
Sure. New issues that have arisen, or old issues that have finally died.
Have been resolved, that's right. Yes, that too, particularly in dining services.
That's right.
I
so,
suspect.
And we realize that the survey is a snapshot in time, but it also, I think, gives us an inkling in terms of the service level and an area that we want to put our energies towards. So as I said, I think in the beginning of 2016 is based on resident satisfaction. That will really dictate where we put our energies and where change would be expected to come. And an example of that is if we're really highly satisfied in a particular area, probably very little change will come. We want to maintain that result or maintain that score, if you will. In an area that has very low level of satisfaction, that would be an area that we'd want to change. And so residents should expect to see efforts that would fuel change or fine-tuning, tweaking in that particular section.
All right. Well, I think that makes sense. You certainly don't want to mess with perfection, do you?
That's right. In a community like ours, I think we'll never achieve perfection.
Close to it.
But we want to be pretty darn close.
We have a call. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I have a question of how are the people in the sales office being directed to answer questions of prospective residents who have heard that we are less satisfied in 2015 than we were in 2014. How are they answering that question?
So that's a great question. I don't know specifically how they would be answering, but I can give you my 2 cents on what I believe is, when we look at resident satisfaction in general, the truth be told that between 2015 and 2014.
Hold on, excuse me, Ben. Caller, would you either turn off your TV or I'm going to cut you off and you can listen to it on your TV? Which would you like?
I turned the TV off. I had it muted, but
All right,
evidently
thank
I
you.
wasn't good enough. I turned it off.
There
Thank
we go.
you.
We were getting some feedback. So between 2014 and 2015, when you look at the mean of all items, so all, I can't remember the exact number of questions that we asked, 55 questions
Excuse
or
me.
so.
Caller, we're still getting feedback. I'm going to turn this off and let you listen on TV.
So within all 55 of those areas, the total statistical change between 2014 results and the 2015 results was statistically insignificant. So in other words, it was less than a 2-point change when you look at the mean of all items within that survey. So
What about the question, would you recommend green spraying? I
Yeah.
think that probably is the most significant, and that's what I suspect she's referring to.
Yeah, the question of would you recommend, it has ups and downs, and I think when you look at independent living, it fell a little bit. When you look at, continuing care over at Garden Ridge, it increased a little bit. So year over year, as you look at the whole campus's result, relatively flat in that respect. But when you consider the result, really what the survey response tells us is that a huge number of residents, and you're really looking at almost 9 out of 10 residents that would recommend green spraying to family and friends. And so those are very much high results in the industry. Areas, do we want to improve upon that? Absolutely. I'd like for 10 out of 10 residents to be able to say that. But in theory, we're really talking about very, very respectable numbers within the industry and within the Erickson network as well.
Okay.
So part of those surveys, keep in mind the last coffee with the executive team, we were intended to bring the results from the resident satisfaction survey, and because of the looming 2-foot snowstorm, 3-foot snowstorm on the horizon, we shifted our conversation that afternoon to focus in on snow preparations. And so as we get into the feedback forums, for each area of domain, we will share the results there. So for example, when you come tomorrow morning to the session, you'll be able to see the 2 areas of domain that we're focusing in on that day. You'll be able to see the statistical results of each, depending
For all
on
the
sessions.
questions in that area?
Exactly right.
All right.
That's right. So, so some have felt a little bit like, well, I wish I could have seen this in advance so that I would know kind of where to gauge. And my response was, well, we intentionally didn't do that, and the reason for it, I don't want us to chase the number. Really, what I want is your individual perspective in the area of dining services or in the area of resident life, for example. I don't want it to be, how did we move from 79 to 79.5? Let's not get stuck on the numbers. Let's really look at the domain and what we're going for, and how do we put together strategies and efforts that can continue to boost resident satisfaction at Green Spring.
Well, and certainly in each area, there were questions that were not asked. The survey had a pretty limited, and in fact, I think it seemed to most of us that it has become more and more limited in terms of its applicability and in terms of its scope in each of these areas.
That's an interesting perspective, because the questions really haven't changed year to year much.
Hello, caller, you're on the air.
Good morning, Ben. This is Sandra Paskin calling with a follow-up on the question or discussion that I had with you. I think it was the last call-in that you had about my windows. And you told me to call General Services, which I did, and eventually the vendor came along. You had to wait 2 weeks, though, because they only come to Green Spring every 2 weeks, once every 2 weeks. And he said that there was absolutely nothing more that he could do that he hadn't already tried, and it was impossible
sort of got the impression it was poor construction to start with, and that I can believe because it affects so many of the windows. So I just wanted to put you in the picture of where I stand now, that nothing can be done. And the second question I have for you, Ben, is that last Saturday there was a disaster in communications in the Jefferson dining room when there was no official notification for residents that the dining room was hoping to close earlier and recommending that people come in at 3 o'clock earlier to have dinner. But it didn't say when they were closing. And then when we got there earlier, like I did an hour earlier, then you found out that the dining room was going to close at 6. There was no notification other than a little thing that was on the desk there stating that they were hoping to close earlier because of staff appreciation event rather. And it was just very poorly communicated. Thank you, Ben.
Thanks, Sancha.
Thank you, Sancha, for the feedback on that. I'm going to write a note here about that as far as the communication of the time frame. There was an event on Saturday that we were hosting for all the student employees as part of the end of year wrap up. We did not have a student holiday gathering or even a launch party for that group, and so just a chance to be able to to appreciate the staff and all that they continue to provide for residents in the community. There was an event that was being hosted that Saturday evening. Now, as far as the communication of those timelines and the alterations, I apologize if that did not happen in an effective way, but I'll make a note of that. Mm-hmm. Regarding windows, and I'm going to use this, Ms. Paskin, as a general response, and because this may also be applicable to other residents as well, is just as Ms. Paskin noted, if there is a particular issue with a window, for example, in your apartment home, the correct approach would be to notify the General Services team. And just as she indicated, we have a window vendor that comes out that's on the campus every 2 weeks, and basically that window vendor can assess for any adjustments that can be made to a particular window. I'm not aware of the specific details regarding the window issue and whether or not it sounds like they've done all that they can do to fine-tune that. As you know, that there are window replacements on the horizon here for Green Spring residents.
Is that still on the table?
It's on the table. In fact, that will happen for one neighborhood in 2016 this year. Mm-hmm. So we're in the process right now of working out.
You're replacing even those that don't need replacing.
Well, we're going to.
One would think they didn't.
We're going to life cycle one entire neighborhood's windows.
Okay.
And so at this stage, they're all in neighborhood 1. And that is, at least 17 years old, right?
Right.
So, so theoretically, some may be in better shape than others, but we're going to go ahead and replace all of those windows in neighborhood 1. Now, there's still some logistical issues that we're working out to better understand, exactly what types of windows we're going with, the mechanism for opening them. Right now, as you know, they're sliders.
Yes.
One of the things we're evaluating is whether or not the raised window would be better. They do have double hung windows that you can fold in for cleaning purposes.
How about cranking?
There's lots of different styles, and so part of what we're trying to do is to look at what's a cost-effective solution in this, but also the energy considerations are a part of that evaluation, and then the installation itself. Right now we have aluminum frames. And we're very much anticipating that we will not have aluminum frames moving forward, and that it'll be a much more weatherproof and windproof solution that will enhance that for the campus.
Ben, I would think too, with the construction coming up in that area with the aquatic center,
Yep.
that construction tends to jar things loose. Are you going to do it before the construction of the aquatic center?
Yes. So this is all. Keep in mind the aquatic center is fixed to the clubhouse building. The aquatic center is not. That project will not intend to touch any residential apartment spaces.
But won't you have, I mean, won't they have to do that from the outside?
They do.
In that meadow?
They do.
Uh-huh. I'm just thinking of bulldozers and such that tend to rattle the earth.
Yeah. So, yeah, there will be some impact to the earth, but not anything substantial enough to be moving windows or jarring windows loose. And so this is really,
I'm going to hold you to that when this happens.
I said it. Write it down.
Right.
So our plan for the whole community, and what you and other residents may be thinking about, if I don't live in neighborhood 1, when do my windows get addressed? There's 2 areas of issue. One, sometimes the vendor will tell us your window needs to be replaced, and so there is an opportunity for us to change out some of those windows.
Oh, there is
today.
Okay.
And then secondly is our intention is for this neighborhood 1 replacement to occur as the beginning point, really with each successive neighborhood happening thereafter.
Okay.
So we're really looking at a combined 3-year project, 2016, 2017, and 2018, to effectively replace all of the windows in our existing independent living apartment homes.
All right. Well, that's very helpful. Have you actually replaced any windows?
We have.
All right. So maybe Sancha is one of those who should be on the list.
Yeah. There's, and keep in mind, I think we have 17-year-old windows. Do they leak in occasions? Can you hear a whistle? Absolutely. Unfortunately, that's the case. That doesn't necessarily warrant the replacement today, to expedite that, in other words, because I think we've got 3 neighborhoods full of windows that are, in my opinion, not what they should be. So at this stage, if the vendor is recommending replacement, that's what we'll do. If not, then we'll put that in the queue of whenever the appropriate replacement schedule holds for that. So the good news is the board of directors, was very supportive of this budgeted request item. It's a very expensive proposition.
I can imagine.
To replace windows. We've budgeted $1.6 million just for windows, just in neighborhood 1.
Oh my!
So it's a very, very extraordinary expense, but also one that we know is very necessary.
Yes. Okay, that is expensive.
What else?
That's just what I was going to ask you.
So one minor thing that happened last week was in the lobby coffee machines. So we had heard for quite some time that the new grinding machines were causing some hiccups in some of the lobby spaces, where the coffee dispensary was not kind of instantaneous. You'd actually have to push the touch screen, select the coffee, select the strength of it, and then the machine would grind it and then dispense it. It would take all of about 30 seconds to happen. The machines were not very user-friendly and required a lot of maintenance. So we swapped those out last week, which I think, from what I hear, is all good.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Ben, this is Sancha Paskin again. Talking about the windows still, the vendor did tell me that the only thing that can be done to my windows is to have them replaced. No ifs, ands, or buts. There's nothing else they can do. Thank you.
Thanks, Sancha. Any comment?
No, I mean, Sancha, I'm happy to talk with you directly afterwards, and obviously the vendor would give us directions if that was the appropriate thing to do.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Okay, I have a question about carts. For years and years, it's always been answered that we have enough carts. What we don't have is when you come here and there's no carts every day of the week. If the people who have them in their apartments would bring them back, but they don't because they know they can't find one when they come to use one. So why, our reserve and our budget and everything else certainly could give the residents carts.
Thank you, caller.
Thank you.
So on the subject matter of carts, here's my feeling on the matter is this is a resident issue that needs to be dealt with from a resident perspective. We have recently asked and will take the direction from the council, for example, to say whether or not we want to create a more structured utilization of carts. something that's on the table is to say, you have to check one out, you have to check it back in, which is very bureaucratic, but is the only way that the Green Spring administrative team can keep track of this.
Ben, I think what the caller is saying, and I think what most residents would say, is for heaven's sakes, let's just buy another 3 dozen carts.
Do you realize that we have more than 200 out and about? And so it, in my opinion, is not a matter of quantity, it's a matter of how they're utilized. And so a cart that goes up and belongs in a resident or remains in a resident apartment home is a very, and I'll use some harsh words, is a very selfish approach. That is is not the community spirit that we operate with.
No, and I think we all know residents that probably have 3 or 4 and may or may not be capable of really understanding that they have 3 or 4 that they shouldn't have.
That very well may be.
But how would you enforce something like that in a community like this?
My
And
desire
should
is
you?
not to. My desire is
All
not
right,
to.
good.
But when issues like this come about, this is a classic example like we were talking about, is if there's resident dissatisfaction along these lines,
Right.
do we want to do nothing about it, or do we
Right,
want to do
right.
something about it?
And how do you?
If the something
know.
requires a more stringent approach to how the check-in and check-out process works, I received a letter, in fact, just this morning from a resident who was saying, petty issue but very annoying is the subject area of carts.
Yes.
And his recommendation in the letter was to check them in and check them out. And if you don't return the cart, then there would be a nominal fee applied for that. And it puts us in a really bad position
It
as
does.
management team.
That's right.
But it's also
yes,
not
because
what's
you're
necessary.
you're the cart policeman.
That's right.
And I know you don't want to do that.
Well, not only do we not want to do that, I don't think we need to do that. I think really the call is one of being a respectful resident within the community and returning the cart after its use. If more long-term need is necessary, buy a personal cart, and you can keep it in your apartment home. That's perfectly acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
So
And a good many residents do have those collapsible
absolutely,
carts.
absolutely. Yeah. So this is not all residents, and I don't want to categorize to say that there's some people that use them just as they're intended, kind of as the borrowing mechanism.
Oh, yes. Most people, I think.
Yeah, so in my opinion, it's not a matter of quantity of carts. We can buy 200 more carts, and if they end up in resident apartments, they'll never come back. We'll have the same issue again.
All right.
So let's just return
Maybe
the carts.
what you need to do is have a large sale on collapsible carts.
There you go.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
I'd like to agree with Ben that the cart situation is a bit of a selfish deal, but I'd also like to mention that are the people who use the carts for walkers aware that if their doctor subscribes one, that they can get one through Medicare, and then they'll have it all to themselves instead of keeping a walker in their apartment? I see that all the time. I know it's a fact.
All right.
You.
Thank you. Some people do use them clearly. As
Yeah, I mean, a cart as a walking device is
Right.
is really not a safe function.
No,
Certainly, it
absolutely
can
not.
provide stability, but obviously, its bulk and its size creates yet another obstacle to be concerned with.
And they're way too high, really, for.
Frankly, to store a walker in an apartment versus to store a shopping cart in an apartment, the walker is far easier to store.
Much. I quite agree with you. Ben, I think one thing that I have not heard any calls about, but I think the residents unanimously felt was that the coverage of the snow situation here was beautifully done. The meals, the snow removal, your calls, all of it was just almost flawlessly handled.
Thank you. We were bombarded with residents' praise following,
Were you?
and even
All
in
right,
the
good.
midst of the event, which was really awesome to see. I really appreciate people going out of their way to just say, "Hey, we recognized it, and we really appreciate that."
Absolutely, and the fact that you were bussing tables and serving coffee didn't hurt.
Well, we might have to, treat do an extra carpet cleaning for my spills. But it was a fun time. I think it was a great time for the community. It felt for for one of the times here in the community, it felt like we were really together.
You know, I think
And-
that was the sense we all had.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It felt like a community
Yeah.
in the best sense of that word. Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Good morning. My question is regarding the carts. This has been a topic. This is something that has been concerning me, and I kind of tried to do a little bit of research, and then I gave up. But I'm wondering, is the use of the carts for the residents, or for the workers, or for the maids, or for the staff, or for the dining services? How do the residents fit in?
So,
Thank you.
Yeah, good question regarding the carts. So the carts were, purchased for the community, and so as a community, whether it's a visitor that's using it to help shuttle groceries from the car to mom or dad's apartment home, it's intended for that use. For residents to be able to use it after a shopping trip for that same
Right.
use, that's intended for that use. So there's no, we have not carved out to say it's only intended for this, point of use. But the underlying expectation for all of it is that a cart is utilized, borrowed, and then brought back for additional use by others. So think of it as as a bellman's cart in a hotel. If you use a bellman's cart, to unload your luggage as you're arriving to the hotel, you bring it up to your room. How many people keep the bellman's cart in their room after that? The right thing to do in the community spirit is to bring it back down to the desk and utilize it, for others. There are cart rooms in some residential buildings as well, and obviously that's another destination that they can be returned back to as well.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Ben, it's Jan Madden. One thing you didn't mention about the carts, I don't think people realize that there's other places in the lobby that the carts hold. There are cart deposit things very close to me and almost on every floor. I don't know that new residents realize that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jen.
Yeah, that's a good point, and that's what I was referencing with some of these cart rooms in some residential
Right.
buildings. They're available, and that decentralized process also creates sometimes where carts are spread throughout the campus or concentrated in one area versus not. And our team does a pretty good job to shuffle them around to try to balance them back out. But again, I think if wherever a cart is picked up, if it's returned to the same destination, it works beautifully.
Hello, caller. You're on the air.
Yes, I'm at home recuperating from surgery and will not be able to attend any of the survey feedback meetings. Will there be anything recorded and shown on Channel 6 or anything written and put in our cubbies where I can have some input?
Yeah, that's a great question. So,
Thank you.
Each of the feedback forums will be recorded and broadcast, throughout the community. So there's not just one day chance to provide feedback. The management team, the council, the committees are here all day, every day. And so if you're not able to attend one of those sessions, to provide your feedback to either the council, one of the working committees, or to one of the management team members, we welcome that feedback at all times.
All right, and will these be recorded on channel and shown on Channel 6?
They will, yes, ma'am.
All right, good. Well, that should provide enough opportunity then, both to see what happened and to provide feedback.
Indeed, yeah.
All right. Ben, I see that our time is coming to an end here. Is there anything pressing that you would like to leave us with?
I've just kind of chuckled by the shopping cart, so
Yes,
I
had
know
no
it's an
idea.
important issue, but I also I know that this is one that we can solve in working together, and that's where I think the community spirit that we were touching on.
Yes.
I love the feeling of that. I think residents love the feeling, and frankly, I think that staff also loved that feeling. The management team has a significant responsibility to run some of the day-to-day operations within the community, but we, working together, also have a responsibility in the community. And I think this is a very simple issue of let's be mindful to our neighbors, let's be mindful to one another, and let's utilize them for the intended purpose, and let's also see to it that the return happens as part of that same process. So if we felt like we had a shortage of carts, that they're just not around, Absolutely, it's not a matter of dollars and cents. We've got the opportunity to have whatever we need in the community from that perspective. I just don't know that it's not a quantity issue. It's how they're being used, which is the foundation of the issue itself. But thank you to you and the other residents that are constantly looking for ways to raise the bar at Green Spring. This is a wonderful community that we live in, something that I hope we all are very proud of, but I also hope that we all continue to look for opportunities to make it even better. So that's kind of our motto for 2016 and something we're really looking to continue to move forward with.
Well, I think on that high note, that's a good place to stop. Thank you, Ben, for coming in today.
Thank you.
This was most informative and good calls.
Thank you.